Friends, this program is brought to you by the generous support of people like you. Founders Church of Religious Science, a center for spiritual living in Los Angeles, is committed to providing you with inspirational messages daily and weekly to enhance your spiritual journey into your best possible life. To become a supporter, please visit our website or click the link on this page to inform you on how to make your gift. We thank you.
Hello, friend. I want to share with you this morning some lesson on what I call the blessing of imperfection. I don't know how many of you have the notion that you have to be perfect in this life. I certainly don't. And these are some ideas I want to share about why the blessing is imperfection. People seem to think that somehow life has fallen and everything is going to this hot place, as they seem to say. And my thought is that if you really understand the gift of this life, you'll understand it's not perfection that is the gift, it's imperfection. So here's what I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover imperfection is the blessing. Life is not about being perfect, but being excellent. Imperfection, I will say, brings about your creative becoming. So let's see if we can do this. I want to go back to the notion of how we believe that life is fallen. This notion, of course, is the Adam and Eve notion, where Eve takes the fruit, shares it with Adam, and Augustine, somewhere in 400 years after Jesus, decided that this meant original sin and the world is fallen. The Jewish people who had written their myths some 900 years before this never came to that conclusion. And the church didn't even accept it initially. But I want to suggest to you that what this is not about sin. It's about a parental story. It's a parental story. We know now psychologically that up to about 7 years old, a child is able to absorb all kinds of information, but the child is not processing the information, just absorbing the information. Just about when the child reaches the threshold, puberty, coming into adulthood, the child is now able to process and is having his own ideas about things, and we see now that this is where disobedience is. And people who do not really understand myth begin to take myth literally and put us in a place where they're thinking that if you're not obedient to God, you're disobeying God. It's not about disobeying God. Just in the same way that we said God rested after 7 days, or on the seventh day, after 6 days. God doesn't need to rest. But it is symbolizing an eternal cycle for human being. And in the same sense, when we talk about obedience to God, it is really symbolizing the parental care that a child needs at a certain stage and age. And so obedience is the vital quality to observe. But as we make that transition and come into that place of adulthood, and we are coming up to it, it is not obedience that we need. We need somebody to understand that the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, brings us into a sense of the law of cause and effect, and also choice and responsibility. That is a totally different set of values and understanding than we expect a child to have. Child cannot have it because the mind isn't ready for it. And so what happens as the child gets to an age where it can leave the parental home? That's what you do. It's a graduation. I know it looks really bad when we talk about Adam and Eve are driven out of the garden. And it looks like, wow, what's happening here? The sin and disobedience, caused this to happen. No, it's not sin and disobedience. It's consciousness. They're ready for the human journey. They're ready to go on their own to be exactly what their parents were or are, to be self-responsible, to be mature. And how are you going to do that if you stay forever at home being obedient to your parents? And this is the story. It's not a condemnation. It's the human adventure. We live in the world of pairs of opposites. And until you can make proper choices in your life, you're going to find it very difficult to know how to make choices and assume the responsibilities for them and how to change your mind at times. So this is really what the story is about. And so Jay, the Yahwist writer, who is writing the stories of Genesis chapter 2 and 3, is also saying that when the man leaves, he's going to earn his living by the sweat of his brow, and the woman is going to have childbirth with pain. Doesn't it seem to you that we're not dealing with that child consciousness anymore, but we're dealing with the adult consciousness now? Because that is true. It doesn't mean that women should just stay home and have children, although some people will interpret that, and men must be the one going out to work. But you must remember, this myth was written years ago when the men were hunters and gatherers, and they would go out and the women would stay in the village and take care of the children and invent agriculture. People don't realize it. And agriculture was far more important than what the men could gather out there and come back with a few, wild animals that, I don't know, by the time they get home, they might not have been much good unless they smoke them. So what I want you to understand is that the law of cause and effect and choice and responsibility are a vital threshold to cross, to move into, if we're going to be self-responsible adults. So the idea now is not about being perfect and listening and being perfectly obedient to God. It's the stages that we're going through and the different things that happen. So we are living really in a situation where the tree of life, then, whatever happened to the tree of life? And whatever happened to the tree of knowledge of good and evil? The tree of life and the knowledge of good and evil went inside. How do I know that? Two things. Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. The paradise is symbolic of the kingdom of God. And now it's within you. And what do? You move through life understanding the wisdom of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, of pairs of opposites, and how to make good choices. But the other aspect that is not spoken about is the tree of life. And the tree of life is where we come into contemplation. We come into the deep silence and to feel the unity and the Spirit of God right there. And so these symbols are so misinterpreted and misunderstood that all we can get from the story is that life has fallen. Life has not fallen. It is perfect just the way it is. Imperfection is the perfect situation for us to evolve into whomever we are. So I'm saying that life is not about perfection, it's about excellence. That's why we are learners. That's why we're always improving. That's why we're moving toward excellence. Here's a story of somebody who became too obsessed with perfection, at least from my point of view. A young man who is very talented and is a musician wanted to go to Juilliard, and he didn't get in. And that allowed him to quit his music, because if he didn't get into this place, then it wasn't worth it for him. Now, we are deprived. We don't know how good that person could have been. That person could have been great. Who knows? But can you imagine if the Beatles and Bob Marley decided that I didn't go to Juilliard, so, I'm not going to do anything with music. And countless numbers of people who have gone through life and didn't go through maybe the best college, that they didn't get into Harvard or didn't get into Princeton or whatever it is that they didn't get in. Can you imagine those people never doing anything? And this is really what we need to understand, that the ideas that we have of perfection oftentimes is somebody else's idea. And what is true of you is that the quirkiness about you is really what you have to bring as the unique aspect of yourself and to contribute to the body, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's science, whatever it is, or whether it's just driving a truck and doing something that people might consider just ordinary. But the idea is to understand that your life is not about perfection. It's about doing the thing you enjoy to the best of your ability. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, he says that we have to be careful that in throwing out the devil, we don't throw out the best parts of ourselves. The conforming to something that you think is perfect, some standard that is arbitrarily set by maybe a group or maybe a person, maybe a teacher, you could easily throw out the best part of yourself. I can remember when John Wooden had a player called Keith Wilkes. And Keith Wilkes had a funny way to hold the ball back of his head like this and throw it into the basket. And John Wooden was a very classical type of basketball coach. But what John realized is that he wasn't going to try to alter the way Keith Wilkes threw the ball into the basket, because it went in there. It was a little quirky, it was different, and this is what I'm calling attention to, that we all have these little differences that may not seem perfect to somebody until we establish it as, gee, this is the thing to do. And so here's another story. This one is a Nasruddin story. And Nasruddin is looking for the perfect mate. So one afternoon, according to this old Sufi tale, Nasruddin and his friend were drinking tea and talking about life and love. How come you didn't get married, Nasruddin asked his friend at one point. Well, said Nasruddin, to tell you the truth, I spent my youth looking for the perfect woman. In Cairo, I met a beautiful and intelligent woman with dark olive eyes, but she was unkind. In Baghdad, I met a woman who was wonderful and generous, but we had no interest in common. One woman after another would seem just right, but there would always be something missing. Then one day, I met her. She was beautiful, intelligent, generous, and kind. We had everything in common. In fact, she was perfect. Well, said Nasruddin's friend, well, what happened? Why didn't you marry her? Nasruddin sipped his tea reflectively. Well, he said, it's a sad thing. Seems she was looking for the perfect man. So you can see what happens to people when we get this arbitrary sense of what is perfect in a life that is constantly changing. Everything changes and ends. So how do you define what the perfect is? So what I'd ask you is, at some stage in your life, did you expect to be perfect? How did it work out for you? Are you still expecting to be perfect? What happens when you don't find that you are perfect or life is perfect? The truth is that life demands that we work to the highest level of our abilities and find a deep satisfaction in that, because that is where it lies. It is an evolving thing. And we have the chance to move from where we are to where we wish to be. So let's talk about perfection, which is your creative becoming. So we're living in this field of time where there are pairs of opposites, and we are forever in the process of becoming. Here, the process thinkers, the quantum scientists will tell you that process is reality. Process is reality. And what do they mean? They're saying in quantum science that every entity in the universe comes into being and perishes. Comes into being and perishes. But our senses can't pick it up. So we see things in a continuous way. It's kind of like almost like a movie strip. You see the film going up, but if you see each film, each bar, with whatever you call it, they don't move. But when the film is running, you see the movement like you see it every day around you. And in a similar way, life is dripping into being and out of being. Dripping into being and out of being. So we shouldn't be surprised at this, because if you look at Revelation 21:5, it says something that underscores this notion. It says, "Behold, I make all things new." What is this? That's change. And what is change? Change, perhaps, is a sad word for creativity. Change is a word that makes you feel like, I don't want it. But if I say creativity, if I say somebody's creative, you said, yeah, that's great. So we have to be careful as we look at these words and we begin to sense how they work in our lives, that many of the times, it's because we call things by the wrong name that we have the wrong attitude toward them. Notice that even in that early myth of Adam and Eve in the garden, that God called Adam to name the animals. Naming also implies knowing the nature of things. Knowing the nature of things. And if you give a dog a bad name, an old saying goes, the dog will live up to it. So if we name things or misname things in a way that should relate to us in a positive way, but we name them in a negative way, then when they relate to us, we won't experience the fulfillment that we could by knowing that they are here to help us along our journey. So think of change as creativity in action. And think of the fact that there is a law of mind in action that is moving this. Now, laws are principles. And even though I say everything changes and ends, principles do not change. That's the one thing that does not change. The principles are fixed. They are the same. And so that's why Ernest Holmes says you must first obey the law before the law can obey you. So you have come into a place where everything is changing, everything seems imperfect, but is perfectly right for what it is that you want to change into and become. And all you have to do is to see it. We have eyes and do not see. We have ears and do not hear, the Bible tells us. And we are here now when we come into that sense of a relational world with the great mind of God. Then we begin to understand how we can move forward in this world like Moses parting the Red Sea. The Red Sea is a problem until Moses has an idea that he can do something and find his way across the Red Sea. So in a sense, it's not literally parting a sea that I'm talking about. These are images, poetic images, mythical images that are there to inspire you that the thing that you think is a problem is really an opportunity that is disguised. And the sooner you realize that, is the sooner you will get out of this notion that oh my God, I don't know what to do with my life. Life is so imperfect. There's so many bad things are happening. Bad things are always going to happen. Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. But it's not just bad things are happening. Good things are happening too. But because we are not people who keep that positive mindset, we allow ourselves to be taken down into the hell of depression if you go far enough. But we don't have to do that. That tree of life that emanates the sense of God's perfection within you, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil that Eve says was good for food. The fruit was good for food, and it was beautiful, and it also gave wisdom, is what the value of eating that fruit offers to you now, that you now need to apply with your adult mind that is coming into that sense of maturity, that sense of spiritual maturity and self-responsibility. And this is beautiful. This is really what you want. So, we say that God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And Meister Eckhart, this is the same world that we are condemning as fallen. Why would God love it and you not love it? It's not about judging it, you see, it's about loving it. God so loved the world, not God so judged the world. God so loved the world. And the idea is that the great mystic, Meister Eckhart, somewhere in the 13th century, had the insight that God did not beget one son. Ernest Holmes says it in the Science of Mind book that he wrote. He says that God did not beget only one son, but the Father is forever begetting the one and only. And this is really where we are with it. So, as we conclude this particular talk, I'm here to tell you that we need to have a different view of what we call imperfection. Imperfection is the blessing. It is not a curse. And imperfection just means that you have a chance to have experience. You can't have experience without pairs of opposites. Good and bad and right and wrong and up and down and dark and light. All these are part of the elements that go into making this wonderful world that you live in. And like Satchma, you should be singing that song all the time. What a wonderful world. And if you sang it more, then it becomes a mantra that you can use to lift your consciousness up to where it ought to be. I want to close with 3 thoughts by Meister Eckhart, a great German mystic. They consider him the greatest Christian mystic. And Meister Eckhart says, be willing to be a beginner every morning. When you get up in the morning, face the day like you have never seen the day before. You have beginner's mind. The Buddhists have the same notion. It's beginner's mind that you come with. And instead of coming to the world as, oh my God, this is the same old world no! You have never seen this day before. You have never seen this moment before. Bring a little excitement into your life. Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here and to be blessed to have this life that I can do something with today, and I am going to do it. The second thing Eckhart says is that what we plant in the soil of contemplation, we shall reap in the harvest of action. What we plant in the harvest of contemplation, we shall reap in the harvest of action. Eckhart has embraced the idea that when you experience that tree of life within you, you now come out of the garden in the field of action, and you experience that good that you contemplated on in that place. Jesus said something similar if you really begin to understand these wonderful stories. He says, when you pray, go into your closet and pray to the Father in secret. And the Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Isn't that amazing? You go into this place, the secret place of the Most High, and experience your divinity. And you walk out of it with that sense of sacredness, that your heart is now shining and radiating and emitting that new light, and you begin to see the world differently. The world hasn't changed. What has changed is your perception of the world. And now what you used to see as totally negative, you see as the work that you can do. Because as Lao Tzu says, the bad man is the good man's job. The problems are the things that you have as your opportunities to do your great work. Can you imagine if there were no problems in the world? What would your work be? What would we all be doing? We'd be bored to our skull, probably killing each other. So, my friends, look at imperfection. It's the gift. The final thing is, the price of inaction is far greater than the cost of making a mistake. Did you hear that? The price of inaction. How many times have you frozen up, didn't dare to do something? As T.S. Eliot says, do I dare to disturb the universe? In a moment there are visions and revisions which a moment will reverse. So it comes into being an opportunity, but if you don't take it, it disappears. And instead of having it, you will be like that knight in King Arthur's story, where he never asked, what ailest thou, when that chalice came about, and he never took the opportunity because his mother always told him that don't ask questions. You see, the perfect thing is don't ask questions, but he should have asked questions. So I'm saying here that inaction, not daring to start, feeling that you have to have everything lined up perfectly before you get going, that's not the way to do it. The best time to start is the only time you can start. In the present moment. That's what the present moment is for. But what you must do is to realize that you're looking forward in your life and working toward something, working toward a greater purpose. And that's why we have the world as it is. From all the things that are happening, there is something special for you to do. And when you find that, you start doing that, and you will find this universe bowing down to you in a way of speaking, because you're now doing God's work. You're doing the work of your life. And so, my friends, we're talking about imperfection is a blessing. Life is not about perfection, but excellence. And when we think of imperfection, think of it as your creative becoming. So you're forever becoming. You're never stopped. You're always evolving. God bless you all. Hello, friends. How wonderful it is to have you here. I really appreciate your taking the time to be here. And I want to invite you to be part of this program, part of this ministry, part of this reaching out. I think we have here a message that I believe you will find quite unique, quite different from any message you have heard. I'm not knocking anybody else's message. I'm just saying that I believe if you listen carefully, you will see that it is worth your while to support. So I'm inviting you to jump in and be part of this. Give us your support, and let us together feel that we can make a positive impact upon a greater field of concern that people have in this world, and that you can be a part of it. So I'm inviting you to look at the screen and see the many different ways that you can do this and participate. And I thank you. Thank those of you who have sent in your wonderful offerings, and those who are about to do it, thank you too. God bless. Let us take a moment now and turn within and feel how wonderful it is to be alive in this world. To know that right where we are, God is. There's not a spot where God is not. The Father is omnipresent. That means there is something totally sacred in you. And that power and that presence within you is there to bring about healing. Healing of any discord, whether in body or in mind or affairs. It is there to bring about a sense of abundance so that we understand that there is no lack and limitation in that spirit that moves in and through you and the universe. And I'm knowing right now that there is this blessing of imperfection, this accepting that whatever it is that I need is already within me in what Jesus called the kingdom of God, or what the ancient priestly writer of Genesis 1 called made in the image and likeness of God. And knowing that these are instruments for guiding our thoughts, of centering who we are, so that we can know that we are forever supported by good. I say thank you, Father, Mother God, and together let us affirm, and so it is. Thank you for sharing this time. Peace.